Hi, folks. This is the second in the round of conversation with impact investing pioneers. And today I have Cedric Lombard with us. He is also an innovator and a pioneer, a real pioneer in this field. He not only helped and partnered with JP to form a Blue Orchard, but he also partnered with another giant in the industry, Roland, of Symbiotics, who formed Symbiotics. So it was Cedric and Roland who formed Symbiotics. And from there, he really has been, his focus has been on impact and sort of getting to the very bottom of the pyramids to help those people. And he created a company called Impact Finance. So welcome, Cedric.
A pleasure, Hassan.
Great, thanks. So we'll start with just sort of trying to get to know you a bit better, as to your influence in early, when you were growing up, as to why did you choose to work? What was the fascination of trying to create a better world? Are you coming from one of the, sort of wealthiest banking family in the world? Why did you choose to dirty your hand in poor South American countries rather than being in the south of France? So maybe you can start there, Cedric.
Well, thank you. It's true. I was born in a banking family in Switzerland, in Geneva. And in Geneva, we have those two pillars in the city, the banking sector, the very focused and dark banking. And on the other side of the river, of the lake, we have the United Nations. And that's part of the identity in Geneva, and basically you choose the side of the lake you'll be. I had my father a banker and grandfather and so on, so I decided to change the side of the lake, and I studied international relations, and had the chance to make my first work, an internship in United Nations in the UNHCR, where I discovered programs for the refugees with financing. And this has been the way, or the way to discover that you could do something helpful with finance. And so that's why I decided to do bank, to go back on the other side of the lake, do banking, but do banking for the poor. And I had the chance, there was a program in the United Nations, in the UNCTAD, United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, held by a brilliant guy that already—
Frank Rosell. Is
exactly.
It Rosell? Yeah, okay.
Exactly. Mid of the 90s, he had this vision. And in 97, he had a big conference organized called Partners for Development, where he basically invited tens of microfinance institutions to discuss about what was next after the development programs becoming financial institutions and banks. So a huge vision, because at that moment, there was only one microfinance institution in the world, I guess, Banco Sol, that had transformed into a real bank. And so I had the chance to work there as a consultant in 99. And that's where I met Jean-Philippe. And basically, that's where the idea of Blue Orchard was born. And so that's the story,
That's what got you started. But
exactly.
the idea of you even being interested in working with poor, was it something in your childhood, your travel, or what motivated you to look in that direction? I understand that the idea of the Grosell's meeting, which is around the same time in 1997, 98, when Hillary Clinton and the Clintons had their meeting of the microcredit summit in Washington, D.C.,
exactly. Mm-hmm.
where they had supported it. So there was this time around where microfinance was not a word that was known. It was all about charity at that stage. And so So tell me a little bit more in terms of your personality that got you interested to look in that direction.
Well, the poverty, more than the poverty, it was discovering the world, no? And outside Geneva, there is no poverty, no nothing. Well, I don't know if it's the poverty per se, but it's the internationalism discover the world. So at the beginning is this, and then as I say, no, it's really in the end in my genes or in my DNA. I have some banking stuff now. So basically the thing is, wow, banking can make good now. And so it's really that. So I think somehow more than an attraction by poverty or whatever it can be, it's more discover or rediscover the power of finance doing good. So somehow, I guess, it's something like impact investing in the genes.
Yeah. No,
but it's really this mix.
No, that's very nice. This is very nicely put, because I think it's inherent to your family discussions and relatability to your father. If you were talking about this, was very appealing, and that really is a interesting dynamics, for you, especially, and what you brought with you to JP, and to the combination of you sort of creating that thing. And I think Frank Gozel's vision to see what in 1997 wasn't there, so, and what we are seeing now, and God willing, it will increase further as we are going. There is no other way. There is only
exactly no doubt, no doubt,
no doubt about it. So, so you met at Banco Sol in Bolivia with JP. I think he was a CEO of an institution there.
He was in Argentina. So we didn't met there. What I did is that, I met this Frank Gozel at the UNCTAD, and I told him, I want to go to Latin America and make internships in microfinance institutions. So I didn't know Spanish. So I first spent 2 months learning Spanish, and then I made 4 months of internships in Peru and Bolivia. And I had the chance, thanks to the UNCTAD, to make 3 internships in Peru, and then something like 4 internships in Bolivia, and really had a good feeling of what microfinance was. Then I came back to Geneva, made a report to the UNCTAD, very informal, but still to value my amazing internships. and he hired me. And that's where we met with GP, who was coming back from Argentina, where he had worked for a microfinance institution of Acción Internacional. And we met there. And basically, there we worked for the project of the UNCTAD was called a virtual market for microfinance.
I remember that, yeah.
Which ended up bought by the given or
Mix, wasn't it the genesis of the Mix?
Exactly,
wow.
It's the mama.
The mama of Mix. Now, it's what's interesting about these conversations is that my memory itself is not so but I remember now that it was the Mix. And I think for folks who don't know what Mix is the Microfinance Information Exchange, and it really was the starting of sharing of benchmarking. There was another pioneer in this field at CGAP, the Microfinance Bulletin that was written out of CGAP, and this Mix idea came from there, and served as because they were benchmarking institutions across, and that was the basis of for investor, and the credibility of our investment was created through the mixed market. So this virtual market really was a fundamental instrument in what you were able to accomplish. So As you were sort of going through this meeting, JP and Frank Rosell, and sort of working to develop this institution, share with us some of the initial thinking and permutations and challenges that you were facing, and how did you sort of overcome them? And especially for younger people that are looking to, the world hasn't ended, the world is still evolving, and some of the audience members may be those future of the world. So tell us about what those things were like and how did you overcome them?
So what I guess in those years, because the creation of Blue Orchid is back in 20 years ago,
Yeah.
It makes us old. At that time, really the challenge was to try to convince investors that what I said, you could do good and well. You could have a social impact, and you could have a return. And that it was not two different things. Basically, what we believed at that time, and many people still believe, you have philanthropy on the one hand and finance on the other, and it's two different things. It's two different pockets, it's two different realities. And in the end, on one side, you need to make money, and you don't care whatever externalities it generates. And on the other, you make good, and same. So basically, the biggest challenge has been this one. I think in 10 years, so that's for me, my 10 years in microfinance, almost 4 years in 4 years and a half in Blue Orchid, 5 years in Symbiotics. What we've seen is a tremendous growth. So as an entrepreneur, and with Blue Orchid, it has been heavy, basically, we split after 4 years and a half, because, and that can be, we can laugh at it when we look at the numbers today, but Blue Orchid was created with 10 million, we were managing 10 millions. And on the fourth year of activity, we grew so much. We went from, I think, 25 million to 80. There was so much heat in that company that we started to fight. And definitely one of the challenge there was, as an entrepreneur, is growth. How do you support growth? With economic growth, you have also growing egos and whatever. And so this is one of the challenge. Obviously, then the industry has grown tremendously. I remember at Symbiotics, on the first year, we were already managing 70 million on the first year of activity. And when I left, we were already at 500 million. And today, well, as you mentioned, Blue Orchid is managing 3.5 plus. Symbiotics is managing 2.5 plus. And so microfinance has, or the first theme in which impact investing has invested, being microfinance, has grown tremendously. After 10 years, and that was the other challenge, and as you've said, I've always tried to be true to that idea of impact investing. 10 years after, I was a bit bored, of traveling too much. I think at that time, we were investing in 25 countries, so it was too much trouble. And one of the things that was striking was the impact. So we were speaking about the impact, saying, we help or we support 1 million, 1.5 million entrepreneurs, that were those entrepreneurs financed by the microfinance institutions. But where they really helped, no, because there were cases of over-indebtedness and what. So I said, no, we need to go down the value chain and understand better the real impact. We cannot say, I finance 55% of rural person and say that I'm social, because it doesn't mean anything. Or this thing about gender, I finance 51% of women. Why does it mean? Are they happier? Are they really empowered? Are they richer? Whatever. So when I created Impact Finance, it was with this purpose. Now we need to be true to what we say, and we need to be able to measure real stuff about impact that are more profound than those numbers that microfinance was showing at the time. So this is another challenge, no?
Yeah, that's really interesting, and we'll come back to some of these points because you said so much. And I think but you really have sort of talked about the key challenges of, taking this divide between philanthropy and investment and merging them and changing the mindset of people to see the viability of this sector, and that's one of the biggest challenge that you faced earlier on. And then I think the challenge of impact that led you to impact finance. And I think we will unfold some of these ideas because they're really interesting for people. So maybe let's talk about this division between the monies, right? Philanthropic, with both sort of looking at it, and how did you convince your first investors? Because at that stage, microfinance was not even known. Besides, I think Dr. Yunus, Grameen, and maybe was more well known than Banco Sol. So what was that like, and how difficult? People are now everybody's an impact investor, but at that stage when there was the name wasn't there, microfinance name wasn't there. How did you convince institutional investors? Because I presume you had both. And how? Tell me some story or some memory that you remember. I have some of my own in terms of getting people to invest, in this. But and one of the things that I think would be interesting to the audience is that when Warren Buffett gave $30 billion to the Gates Gates Foundation, they had a public event in the New York Library, and it was not public; it was sort of invited. And I was at Deutsche Bank, so of course, I got a seat there. And I asked Warren Buffett the question that, well, why don't you're a businessman? Why don't you look at this as an opportunity to invest? And Warren Buffett gave an answer. He said, look, I am good at making money. So I feel I should just make money and give it away. And Bill Gates was there too. So Bill Gates responded because he was more attuned to impact investing. But that divide that you are talking about is even in a good-hearted person like Warren Buffett was there. So tell me, how did that change? How did you convince the first one? And who was the first one?
You are really right to say what you said, and it's still the case. I've just read an article from a famous Swiss banker saying exactly the same. What I know is how to do money, and my wife or whatever, or I have another brain that I used to do philanthropy, and it's two different things. And to mix them, even says, is dangerous. So no, well, back in the history, I guess at the very beginning, we were always trying to suggest to the investor that professionalism, due diligence, liquidity, all those words that the investor like to hear, no? And at the same time, and there, well, you've known us, you've seen us so many times when we were with Jean-Philippe. There is this emotional part where Jean-Philippe was so good at, no? And I remember some meetings where he was making some lady investor cry because of this emotion and the story, the story told. And well, for us, I think it has always been a mix of those two. Really strive to be serious, talk about the rating, and I think somehow in 2004, you remember we made this huge project for us. It was huge because we wanted to make a CDO, the first CDO of a pool of microfinance loans pooled into a CDO. And that has been, well, a huge amount of work, a huge amount of dreams. And it was exactly that, you know, a total mix of goodwill on the one hand, with foundations like Omidyar, putting seed money, public institutions like OPIC, helping, and on the other hand, JP Morgan selling those papers on the market, no? And in the middle, S&P, no? Popping out with a rating. And,
Yeah.
so I think it is this mix of professionalism on the one hand and emotions, feelings on the other.
Yeah. So what role did Dexia play? Because that was also a very important part of the growth of Blue Orchard.
So the UNCTAD, this Spranggozel that we mentioned, he basically tried since '97 to create, or even before, to create a fund where a real fund, an impact investment fund to finance those microfinance institutions. Well, because he was based in Geneva, he tried to convince the private banks there or other banks. Everybody told him, well, crazy lad, remain on your side of the lake. Don't
come on.
So exactly. So he went to Luxembourg and he found a visionary guy that was heading a bank called Banque Internationale à Luxembourg, Bill. And well, I can say his name because I think his name was Roulans. And he was the chairman of that bank, and he said, okay, I put 10 million. And they created the fund in 1998. The fund was managed by AXA for 2 years or so. And they made 2 investments in 2 years. And then that's where the idea came out. Jean-Philippe was hired by Dexia because Bill had become Dexia by the time. And that's where the idea came out of creating Blue Orchard. So the fund was already created. It was still 10 million of the bank, of Dexia Bank. And then we found new investors, a lot of women investors.
Yeah, there were women investors. Yeah.
Yeah.
So individual investors initially. Initially.
Yeah. So it was the money of the bank, the treasury of the bank at the very beginning, those 10 million. Then we raised 10 other million. And I remember one day we had this investor, this first pension fund coming in, and we were something like 20, 25, and they put 20 at once. Yeah.
So I think it was, so what maybe I'm hearing was individuals that you were able to convince, like the Raul, what was his name? The banker out of Bill?
Roland. Mm-hmm.
Roland, that, sort of saw the vision. I think he saw he saw the social impact of it, and within his skill set, just like you started with the banking background. So Roland, so in some way, indirectly, is also a part of this creation, and the women.
He's part.
And
he has been a board member of Blue Orchard for years.
Yeah. So I think that's something that I didn't know about, and then I think the idea of the platform that really helped you was the credibility of Dexia, the name, because nobody knew Blue Orchard, right?
Exactly.
And that got you these clients of Dexia, the women clients that started to build on that, and that sort of get you started, and then the rest of it is history. Went from 25 to 80, and then 80 to 800 million and to 2 billion. But that sort of pivot point where you started to see from the individual investors to the institutional investors, because I think the growth came from not the individuals, right? It came from the institutional side. What were the circumstances that, led to that growth? And then you're sort of starting Symbiotics in a different way. I remember walking with you and Roland and saying to you, this is so stupid and so limited in my vision. I said, why are you starting Symbiotics? Why do you need this company?
But the concept was different. The market was starting to bubble, to be very dynamic. And what we saw, you remember that in Switzerland, there was this important fund that was created in 2003 called Responsibility. And at the beginning, Blue Orchard was sourcing deals to Responsibility.
Yeah,
and that's where also a conflict appeared, because Jean-Philippe wanted to remain an asset manager, and we said, and myself and Roland said, no, we should help the market to grow and also provide services to other funds. And so Symbiotics, when it was created, was a pure broker, and so our main client for years has been Responsibility, but all those funds that had no clue, with people that didn't want to travel, basically we sourced them their portfolio, and that's so the business model was different. Blue Orchard was an asset manager, and Symbiotics was a service provider to help the industry grow.
And I think they played an important part in it, right? And then there's still sort of that, mostly Symbiotics is issuing bonds for individual clients, and that's where the growth has come. So that's really very interesting, Cedric. I think I want to sort of go from there. So having the success of Blue Orchard and having Symbiotics on the other side, how did you sort of transition from Symbiotics? And I know in that some period of time that Blue Orchard also started to create an equity side with JP had led.
That became Bamboo.
And that sort of transitioned into this Bamboo Finance that was looking beyond microfinance and that was looking to other assets. But then at Symbiotics, I'm sure that as a human being, you always are pioneering and within your spirit looking to do other things. Tell us a little bit about the evolution from Symbiotic and how its growth happened, and where, initially Responsibility, but then they changed as well, right? When Klaus Tischhauser and Christian Speckhard had come into it, they started to do their own underwriting as well. But tell me a little bit about that evolution within Symbiotics and some of the challenges and how you sort of transition from there as well. And then we will talk about impact finance and the social side of things.
So as you know, from the pioneers' time, then the market consolidated, and I think in 2007 there is this new word that appears. I think invented in New York, by Rockefeller Foundation, impact investing. So at one point, having read some papers, being puzzled about some things that we were seeing in the markets, that in 1998, I created the first office in the field of Symbiotics in Mexico. So I saw a lot of Mexican microfinance institutions, some of which were pretty disappointing. Starting to ask myself questions. And basically, at one point, I came to my colleagues at Symbiotics and told them, look, guys, we need to open the scope. We are not doing microfinance. We are doing impact investing. That's what the industry will become. And we need to open the scope. We cannot stick to this little niche. we need to open. So they say, well, as they always say, and what you told us to my son von Roland, what? It's too early. It's not the right timing. You are crazy. Well, so on. So I say, well, if it's not with you, it will be with me. So there, that's when I decided to leave. And it's true that I left early, but at the same time, exactly at the same time, responsibility also started to look at other team. And that's exactly the same time where Jean-Philippe, who is the same kind of entrepreneur, I guess, that I am, created a bamboo at the site, exploring new ways. And so that's where it came from. And in the end, I think, 10 years after, we see that, nobody speaks anymore about microfinance per se. All the microfinance specialists call them impact investors. So the name now took over. It's true that still most of what impact investing is microfinance. I think something like 70% of all investment of so-called impact investing are made to microfinance institutions. But
that's the best track record compared to other sectors.
Exactly. Yeah. No, and the most the one that has the most traction as well.
Yeah. Great. So I think maybe we can talk about then your transition to impact finance and what challenges were you trying to tackle and what challenges did you face in terms of dealing with smaller grassroots organization and much more humbler, and how did you see those challenges and how did you see the impact versus some of what you had said, the disappointment in the microfinance industry, especially a lot of consumer banks that were operating in Mexico. Tell me a little bit about that experience, Cedric.
So one of the things that we were seeing with microfinance, and I think it was 10 years ago, it was the first things you could see on apps and stuff, and new possibilities where basically a bank could become the way of going towards new technologies such as energy, solar panels, or services, and so on. So there I had a set of a project that approached me. For example, a guy that had invented a small kiosk with a reverse osmosis at low pressure and solar panel to filter water, salty water. And the machine was costing something like, I don't remember, $5,000. Mm-hmm. And he came to me and said, how can I associate myself to microfinance institution for the water to be sold and pay slowly the machine? You were seeing already at that time all those projects with the taxi using gas and changing their models.
Yeah, CPG, what's it called? Compressed gas.
Exactly. So all those projects were there, and we were seeing for the microfinance the possibility to get out and to become actors into a major change. So that's where I saw the opportunity. There was also a lady, and that has been a project that we've followed on after that. Artisanal miner, you know that in mining, basically 90% of people working in gold mining are artisanal miners, informal, but they are completely out of the banks because generally it's full of mafia and so on, and so he wants to touch. And also at that time I had this lady coming in, popping out and saying, so this made me think that there were a possibility to explore other things. The other great challenge, and as you say, commercial loans, in many cases, microfinance was disappointing because in the end, you had those small entrepreneurs selling Coca-Cola bottle or Swiss chocolate in the poor neighborhoods, and there was not so many cases of producing people. So I was saying, well, if we want to generate employment, if we want to generate an economy, we need to focus on SMEs. So that's where it was born. And the other, as I already mentioned, the impact. What more can be said on impact? What else can we measure? And that's where we created impact finance. So the idea was exactly the same: create a fund. What I had done with Roche Symbiotics was pure debt. So we created a private debt fund, and it went to those companies and financed them directly. So the first project we financed was one of the first gold mines in the world to have the fair trade or fair mines certification. And so in Switzerland, we created or we helped to create an association uniting the refiners, the jewelers, the watch producers to pool clean gold or better gold, called the Better Gold Association.
So the integrated approach.
Exactly, value chain approach. And then we did the same with coffee, cacao, quinoa, nuts, and financing into the value chain actors that were aggregated.
Were you financing the receivables, or were you giving them working capital, or what sort of financing were you providing?
So we went with a fairly broad approach. One of the dream of the objectives was to bring more liquidity than microfinance funds, because I was conscious that this was a main point for the investor. So we have basically 1/3 of the fund paying, making factoring or so buying products for it to be sold in the coming months. That is very fast in rotation and generating a lot of liquidity. Then we have 1/3 midterm, up to 3 years, 1 to 3 years, and then more than 3 years. Some projects that are bigger investments. We even have a forestry project, producing trees that produce nuts, that produce oil for the skin.
So you divided your portfolio into shorter term, longer term, mid-term assets to create liquidity for investors. Did you keep like any slash of money in just bonds to create the liquidity? It was just straight, all of the money was deployed into the impact investing?
Most of the money was deployed. And we always keep a portion of liquidity. But it's pretty liquid because anyway, we have something like 15% of the portfolio coming back every quarter. So it's fast. So
what were the challenges there? Were you, because you were working very much on the cutting edge of impact investing, were you able to provide the returns that the investor was seeking? Were you sort of prioritizing investors that were sort of socially interested? And do you see the disconnect between the social and the financial aspects? You know, because for me, Cedric, I see them not separated, but really ideally they are intertwined like the DNA. When you start to see business opportunities in social goal, that's the ideal state. The reality is much rougher. How do you see those concepts and your practical experience in really trying to do grassroots, mission-oriented, rough goal? It's difficult to do transactions.
So starting with the challenges. The challenge when you start is the track record. So I had 10 years track record in microfinance. I come to see a cousin of mine who was a banker and told him, well, look, I have a fabulous track record. I've lent over 800 million over those 10 years, and I've not lost a cent. And he told me, Cedric, you've not lost a cent. You have not learned anything. So thank you. So when we started, and again, no, the question of the track record is hard. No? The financial world is difficult. So, and of course, we were somehow reinventing a new thing. And it's true, it's different to finance a financial institution than an SME. So we've learned. You say a lot, grassroots, small. One of the first lesson that I've learned is that if in microfinance, small was good, but not necessarily a small microfinance institution, but the small end client. When you finance SME, small is hell. No, small is loss.
Yeah.
It's terribly hard. So at the beginning, we started with a fund of 3.5 million. So we were bound to make small
Loans,
deals. And it has been very hard. So as we've grown, we've increased the size. We've been to companies that were not so small, that had a huge growth potential. And it's what you were saying. For example, we financed 5 years ago a company specialized in transforming used cooking oil that they were partially recollecting from Bogota in the restaurants into biodiesel. And when we financed them, I think they had a turnover of something like 8 million. And 3 years after, when we left, they were selling something like 60.
60?
So because there was a huge potential, when we came in, they were in distress because of the crisis of 2008. They had problems, and they were able to resolve their problems as we were financing them, increase their scale, and do it. We also financed a company, some kind of similar growth that 3 years ago was sold to Nestlé. They were the biggest producers of dried golden berry in the world. Imagine. And they've been sold to Nestlé. And again, no, I think it has been a great success.
Yeah. And your focus has been Latin America, right? I mean, that's where you've been.
That was something internally, as I told you, I couldn't travel anymore that much.
Yeah.
In the end, everything started in Latin America. So for me to go back, we created the Impact Finance in 2010. In 2013, I went to live in Colombia, and I've lived there until July last year. But I left more for COVID reason.
Sure. It was scary. Good. Wow. I can talk to you for a couple of more hours, but I'm respectful for your time and my viewers' time. But I still have some importance. Would you mind if we extended it for another 10 minutes?
Go on.
Just to conclude, because I think Cedric, we haven't scratched the surface. There's a lot of there, but what I would like to say to you is maybe the two things that I would like you to speak on. One is, if you want to change development, you have to change the instruments of development. How do you think, what are the instruments of development, like foundations and development banks and impact investor and impact funds? What changes do you think are important for us to really accelerate this real movement, and not this everybody now is an impact investor? So talk to any big company, they say, oh, we are impact investing. They talk up a storm. You don't understand most of it. When you look, there's nothing there. So what do you want to give your wisdom to the idea of what is really needed, you think, from your perspective, to instigate the real change that you have been a founder of 3 very important initiatives. So please, if you can think about that.
Well, I believe one very important thing, and everything lies there. We claim transparency, we claim accountability, and so I think measuring is the key. So what does it mean? It means you need to be able to measure. That's one. No, is there information? Do I want to? That's one. And what I want to measure. During those 10 years in impact finance, we've walked the walk now. What do we say to investors? So first we say, well, let's be as simple as we can. Let's invent a rating where we can say him a letter, a A, a B, a C, and he will know if it's good in impact or no. So we have this beautiful rating called CarMax, the maximization of your karma.
CarMax.
And we ended up with investors that anyway were not understanding a word. It was relating to nothing. And at one point we had an investor, it was a fund of fund, and they came to us and they say, okay, well, yeah, we love CarMax, but we have 20 investments in 20 funds. They have 20 different methodology to speak about impact. And we can't relate to any of them to speak to our investor about their impact. Can you give us one number, one metrics? And so we say, okay, yeah, we are completely wrong. No? We need. So that's when we decided to adopt the methodology proposed by Impact Management Project. And I think that is key. How do I explain impact in simple terms so that the investor first believes me and believes what I do with his money makes sense. No? So I think that's the big challenge. And as long as there are no standards, but the evolution of the market over those 20 years has been huge as well. No? I think sustainable finance is structuring itself. It's getting towards standards. At least in Europe, they've made this huge step last year. And somehow, I think in 10 years down,
yeah.
there will be standards for impact investing.
Yeah. Well, you have seen, in the press, the Deutsche Bank controversy and the controversy with BlackRock, where the insiders were starting to say that this is all, washing, so this is all whitewashing. But I think
it's great. I think we live a great moment, no? Because it's exactly that. What do we do, no?
Yeah, but I think the impact measurement is one of the most difficult things, that we can do. And I'm not sure, Cedric, that, the asset managers can do randomized trials to develop impact. Even that has a lot of challenges to it. And your idea of simplifying things to convey to the investor, that is a great concept. But how do you do it, and how do you sort of set those standards? I mean, that's a monumental task in my mind.
I think you can be pragmatic, and obviously you can do randomize and ask academics to come, but it's impossible. Maybe with microfinance, you can compare a population without loan and one with loan. But anyway, wouldn't they have any loan with anyone? And you cannot extract the world from the world. Because anyway, there will be other influences and so on. So no randomize, but take elements that are very clear in microfinance. If it's a unique client, it's a unique client. You are the first one, or the microfinance institution is the first one to lend to him. So that's true bancarization. That's true access to financing. So you can take that number. And you can, obviously, if you have a fund of microfinance those days, you cannot. I remember 10 years ago, one thing that struck me was this guy in Lima or in Peru. And on average, every single client of microbanks that we were serving had five microfinance institutions. So what is the impact? Is it of indebtedness? I don't know, and so on. No?
Yeah.
So I think there are, obviously you won't prove that you change the life of someone, but there are some things that you can look at. For example, for us, inclusive businesses. You have a small producer of gold, because I took this example earlier.
Yeah.
This guy basically is extracting something with mercury. So the mercury, he inspires it when he eats it with his
hands. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's detrimental to his health. So it's better if he doesn't use mercury. So that's one, mercury, health. Then what does he extract? Basically, with mercury, he can extract something like 60% of the gold that is in the mineral, whereas with other technology, he can extract 90%. What does it mean? It means more revenue. And so you take a situation, and this you can calculate, because the mercury you can calculate what he didn't use. The increase in productivity you can calculate. So then you cannot say he's better off, but you can assume it because he's gaining more money without more costs. For the same work, he gains more. So that's better. Well, he can spend it in whatever he wants, but that's better. So I don't think you can be pragmatic in approaching it, finding the right elements. For us, for example, a key element is, when do you give the pay? You produce coffee. The most important thing is that you are paid as when you release your coffee.
Yeah, sure.
So if you pay 1 day later, 2 days later, 5 days later, or 30 days later, the change in impact is huge.
Yeah.
And this you can calculate. It's very pragmatic.
Yeah.
So I don't think we can make things complicated, but and that, I think that's very much you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate
but be very pragmatic.
Yeah.
Look for solution instead of looking for problem.
Yeah. No, I think for us, what I've tried to do is to recognize that if you just, I went to microfinance institutions, and in the hallways they had reams of paper of reporting they were doing. They were sitting outside. It was totally useless. So to be pragmatic, and then of course the foundations and all that, development banks, they have a tendency to pile on everything, whatever the mandates of the governments are, to these people. So we try to do so that we try to say to the borrower, what is your social motivation, what you're trying to do, so they can link the social goal with the business objective. For a small business to, trying to survive, Cedric, how do you sort of focus on all these things when your core is to just survive as a business? And I think this is an important area. And I think what your advice of being pragmatic and using your head and focusing is an important one. There's just one last question I will ask you but how about, one of the things that is important for your growth of your ideas is financing. How do you sort of, right now, as an impact finance, who's financing you? Are they the same people that are financing responsibility and Blue Orchid and other people, or are you sort of seeking different type of financing, or what gates we have to open within the financing world so efforts like your can really grow and flourish? Do you have any views on the financing needs?
Since I think 5 years or so, you have this new idea, or maybe 10 years, the blended finance now.
Yeah.
So associating soft money from public banks with private money. I'm not a fan, because I think if you get some soft money from the public banks, you lose your soul to those people. So, well, for me, it has always been very important at Blue Orchard, as Symbiotics and now as Impact Finance, to be true to the clients I wanted to speak, private investors. So that's it. With, of course, with microfinance, pretty fast institutional funds, and especially pension funds came in with huge amounts of money.
Yeah.
When I came back to Switzerland last summer, I saw one of the guys that helped us a lot with Blue Orchard to raise money, called Melchior de Muralt. I don't know if you've ever met him.
I heard his name. I've not met him.
So he was a magnificent sales guy.
Yeah.
and this is the one that found us this pension fund that invested in Blue Orchard and enabled us to double the amount. And I told him, look, Melchior, I have 50 million, find me 50. I can invest them, find me 50. And he told me, Cedric, forget about it. The world has changed since 20 years. I cannot do that. First, well, I'm getting a bit old. So I left that too. And he said, second, well, since 2008, the financial world has changed and you are too small to be big. And that has remained, no? Well, it's hard to be small. Well, we discussed that. And really today our limitation is to be small. We cannot grow because we are small, and it's so sad. And looking back, I think we created our fund in 2011. I think that was the last. The regulation is so heavy, or maybe you can go to the Cayman Islands or whatever. It's not that heavy, but it's difficult. And I think to start today, you have to dream bigger and really to strive to tap into bigger funding, because it's difficult to be small.
Yeah. Great. One last question. I'm sorry, I'm saying last question. So interesting views of yours. How do you see the future? How do you see impact investing growing? What's your vision in 20 years from now, 30 years from now? How do you see this thing growing? Not growing.
I think it's what you said at the beginning. It's unstoppable. I think still it's a generation thing. I think the baby boomer have not understood what we do. Well, maybe we are all baby boomers. I don't know, but still we are in the next generation anyway. But for baby boomer, it's difficult. They still have, and it's what you said about Buffett. We still have this. They still have this this brain cut in two. No. Sure. Whereas for us, and much more for the millennials and the other generation, more recent generations, there is no border. So I think it will accelerate. And because of the challenges humanity is facing, the planet is facing, I guess, in 10 years, nobody will be able to do finance as we were doing it now, or as we are doing it now.
Yeah, and the internet-based financing, the crowdfunding ideas, all very important.
The availability of information as well, because we see those fintech doing microfinance, and it's amazing the kind of information they have. They know everything on their clients. And so that's also, when in terms of impact, it's just amazing. And say anything.
Great. Thank you so much, Cedric. Appreciate your time, and it was a pleasure.
Thank you very much, Assad.
Yeah, thank you.
A pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, good.